that has been struggling, 3 turnovers and 21 points off that early. And then you get behind the chains, they can do what they did, which control the ball on offense, keep it away from us, and make it really hard on us.
Rod Carey suffers his first loss as coach of the Owls.
And up next, his predecessor is coming to town. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inside the Nest. She's Brooklyn Vaughn. I'm Dan Wilson, and we have a lot to get through today.
Jeff Collins and his Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets will be coming to Philadelphia this Saturday.
And we'll hear from Collins coming up in the next hour of football talk.
But before that, a stumble in Buffalo in all 3 phases of the game. Rod Carey here has his game face on for his first on-the-road matchup. And the Owls are off to a good start here as Christian Braswell picks off the pass from Matt Myers to get the Owls in great field position early in the game. Check the bottom of your screen here. Isaiah Wright is celebrating before the pass is even thrown. Russo has time and finds him in the end zone to get the Owls on the board for 6. This lead doesn't last as Jarrett Patterson bounces the outside to put the Bulls up 10-7. Now here's a big moment of the game as Temple gets the 3rd down stop, but it comes with a price. Senior linebacker Sean Bradley is called for targeting and ejected from the game. The Bulls take advantage of this on the very next play as Matt Myers fakes out the cameraman and the Temple defense as he runs in another 6. Right before the half, the onslaught continues as Kevin Marks pushes through for yet another Bulls touchdown. That's 24 unanswered points for Buffalo to close out the half. 4th quarter now as Anthony Russo tries to make something happen. He scrambles out of the pocket and throws, but the ball is tipped and intercepted by Joey Banks. He's going to take that to the house and put this one well out of reach for the Owls. Well, one of the few bright spots late here as Russo hooks up with Brandon Mack for a 33-yard touchdown, but it was nowhere near enough as the Bulls down the Owls by a final score of 38-22.
Owls drop one at the hands of the Bulls for the 2nd straight season. The storyline was the 4 turnovers for the Cherry and White, with all 4 of those turnovers coming from the hands of Anthony Russo. He had 3 interceptions and 1 fumble. Brandon Mack had a day for himself in the losing effort with 72 yards and 2 touchdowns, while receiver Jaden Blue also continued his successful season. For Buffalo, Matt Myers completed just 9 passes for 62 yards, but the Bulls' run game was as advertised. Running backs Jarrett Patterson and Kevin Marks combined for 205 yards and 3 touchdowns. Some of the Owls' positive stats on the day are misleading considering the too little, too late 4th quarter attempted comeback. The Owls dropped to 2-1 on the year.
Now take a look at this. The Owls offense was off to a hot start in their first 2 games, putting up a total of 695 yards against Bucknell. That's a much different story than the 289 total yards they struggled to put up at Buffalo. The Owls go from 188 rushing yards week 1 to just 31 yards against the Bulls. Another big issue they faced this past weekend was 3rd down efficiency. It was something Temple had excelled in week 1, converting 11 out of 15 against Bucknell, but they were only able to convert twice out of the 16 opportunities they had on Saturday. And it all adds up to one ugly loss.
On Thursday's edition of OwlSports Update, we asked Twitter what's more likely to happen. Temple rushing for 200-plus yards in this game, or the Owls to give up 3 touchdowns? Well, 78% of you who voted for the 200-plus yards, and that 78% was wrong. The Owls only ran for 31 yards and gave up 5 total touchdowns. Buffalo scored 4 touchdowns on offense and added the defensive touchdown on the pick 6 in the 4th quarter.
And after the game, Carey said this loss was on him. He said he didn't have his team ready to play, which is something you'll often hear from coaches to take the pressure off of their players. So my guess is that Carey will want to look ahead instead of back when he holds his weekly news conference in just a few minutes. With that, let's go now to our beat reporter, Ray Dunn, who is live at Edberg Olson Hall as we wait for Carey to take the mic.
Hey, Ray.
Thanks, guys. Obviously, a lot to talk about today in this presser for Rod Carey. And I think it's going to start off the field. A lot has been made of the decision not to let players speak after the game to the media, And on the field, there was also quite a bit to talk about offensively and defensively. Plenty of struggles, plenty of blame to go around. The offense not able to convert on third downs, going 2 of 16, a trend continuing from the Maryland game that they won, and defensively allowing over 200 yards on the ground. A lot certainly that Rod Carey will have to address as they head into Georgia Tech this week.
And on Saturday, the Owls did something that they haven't done in 6 years. They lost on the road to a team with a losing record, which Temple hadn't done since October 26, 2013, when the Owls lost at SMU. After the game, Coach Rod Carey did not make the players available to the media. Here's a pair of tweets now from OwlScoop.com, where Carey said, quote, "We've got a short window for the plane, and so you've got that window. And plus, to be dead honest with you, they're a hurting group right now, and they're kids. It's my job to protect them. I won't do that all the time to you. You guys know that. But this one, they're hurting a little bit. So, got to keep that in mind every once in a while." The loss of former special teams coordinator Ed Foley continues to sting the Owls. Temple's special teams unit committed yet another turnover on Saturday with a botched snap that led to Buffalo starting its possession inside the 10-yard line. 2 plays later, and the Bulls scored to take a 10-7 lead, a lead that they never gave up.
Nothing went right for the Owls on Saturday. The offense, defense, and special teams all faltered, and it started in the second quarter.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about our game review segment.
Yes, the second quarter was where Buffalo outscored Temple 24-0. Owls just had 1 first down in the entire quarter, not to mention a bad snap on a punt and a sack fumble that set the Bulls up for 14 points alone. The Owls started out the game with a 7-0 lead in the first, only to allow more points in the second quarter than they would score in the entire game. The Owls haven't allowed 24 points in 1 quarter since 2017, when they lost 45-19 at the hands of UCF. The defense didn't play as well in this one as they did against Bucknell and Maryland, but this unit really didn't have much of a chance to shine thanks to the special teams errors and the many turnovers.
If it's any consolation, the Owls went into this weekend's matchup ranked 130th in net punting. That's last in the nation. But after the game, Temple is now ranked at 129, pushing Buffalo down to 130. This Temple special teams unit is ranked 130 overall in the country per ESPN's team efficiency metric, with a 5.3 rating out of 100. The Owls are the only team in the nation with a rating below 10, and Temple announced on Monday that there will be an official change at long snapper for Saturday's game.
Anthony Russo's propensity to find the ball and find Temple receivers has been a concern dating back to last year. In 2018, he threw for more than 2,500 yards with 14 touchdowns, but he also threw 14 interceptions in just 10 games. Through the first 3 games of the season, he's thrown for nearly 1,000 yards already to go along with 10 touchdowns, but once again, his decision-making has been a factor, as he's already thrown 5 picks, 3 of them coming on Saturday alone. He throws a nice ball, but he needs to take care of it better. Throwing the non-favorable coverage has been his biggest problem area.
Another struggle for Temple is its third down efficiency. It was an issue in the Maryland matchup where Temple converted 3 of 14 attempts, and then the trend continued up in Buffalo this past weekend. Get this, Temple only converted 2 of 16 opportunities on third down. The performances in both Maryland and Buffalo games can explain why the Owls are finding themselves ranked 129th in the nation on third down conversions right now. And those are just some of the topics that we expect Coach Carey to address when he takes the podium at Edberg Olson.
So don't go anywhere. We've got Carey, and we'll hear from the players on the other side of the break. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside the Nest.
There you see the empty podium where Rod Carey is expected to come out in just minutes and address the media about the disappointment in Buffalo and the opportunity that lies ahead with Georgia Tech. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and talk about what we expect to hear from Rod Carey today as he addresses the media. I think really something that he needs to talk about is Russo's decision making. He's being called into question now, of course, after getting a little rocky this weekend. Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned in the first segment, he has already thrown 5 interceptions, threw 3 interceptions in this game alone. His decision making has been a problem going back to last season, and you can't continue to turn the ball over against Georgia Tech or as you get into the conference part of the season. So definitely a concern going forward. I also expect, or am at least hoping, that he talks about the special teams, because this is now the second straight week that there have been some special teams blunders. It was really a strong suit for the Owls when you had Ed Foley, you lose him, and it's gone a complete 180. The special teams have now been a complete net negative for this team.
Yeah, two different tales. Looking at the last year team on their special teams efficiency, they looked a lot better than they do now, finding themselves at the bottom of the rankings in the nation. Like we said, the loss of Ed Foley here really stings for the Owls. There is a little bit of an adjustment coming for this Saturday's game against Georgia Tech, as redshirt junior Travis Malinowski will replace redshirt sophomore Cole Lurch in accordance to the depth chart that was released. So hopefully that can take a little bit of the blunders out of the picture here.
And the long snapper, not usually the most famous guy on the team or something you hear a lot about, but when there are problems, that's when you start to notice them, and it has certainly been a problem thus far. Also expect to hear about the players not talking after the game, something that didn't even happen in the first 60 minutes. This team faces a little bit of adversity. First loss in the Rod Carey era, and it was also a road game. A number of the Temple media had gone up there, made the trip, and no players allowed to talk. This is the first time Carey will be speaking since then. Definitely expect to hear about that today.
For sure. Protecting the kids, well, protecting them from what? I'm sure we'll hear about that. But I do think, Dan, that he really is going to focus all eyes forward, tunnel vision with Georgia Tech. I don't think he's going to reflect too much on the loss to Buffalo, but I do think that he is going to address the elephant in the room that isn't really an elephant in the room. He's been known to say that he's not going to prepare any different for Jeff Collins' return back to Philadelphia. But, how can you not? Emotions are running high with the players at this point. So how do you think that that's going to come out in today's press conference? You think he'll address that?
Yeah, you definitely have to imagine he'll be asked about it. I do agree with you. He's going to kind of shove it off. He just took over for Jeff Collins. This is like any other game. And that is the mentality you should have. For the players, you want to keep their emotions in check. Obviously, this is a game for Owls players who played for Jeff Collins or may have even been recruited by Jeff Collins that you want to win. It's your old friend. It's the competitive nature, the whole deal. It's not new territory. Players, football players, and athletes alike experience this all the time, whether a former coach or going up against a former player. You always want to win those games for the sake of bragging rights. But the Owls have a lot to fix. Georgia Tech has not started off the season well, but if the Owls take Georgia Tech lightly, it's not going to bode well for them. Another thing I wanted to hit on is the offensive inefficiencies on third down. That's something that they're definitely going to need to hit on and improve going to Georgia Tech and for the remainder of the season.
Again, we just touched on that. 129th in the nation right now on third down efficiency. Not a good look for the Owls on offense at all. Well, their first adversity of the season has been put behind them with Buffalo, and Georgia Tech won't be an easy challenge either for them.
Now, that's one thing also, is they are returning home. Buffalo was their first road game of the season. They started out the season 2-0. Maryland, they beat a ranked team at home. And it was actually quite the opposite of what we usually see from Jeff Collins, which is usually those slow starts. Then you go up to Buffalo, and might have been a bit of a letdown game, a trap game, if you will, coming back home to play Jeff Collins. All the players and members of the staff who were here when Jeff Collins was the coach have had this game circled on the schedule since the day he took the Georgia Tech job. That doesn't mean you should treat this as any other week. Look, this is a week 4 game, or their fourth game, a week 5 game home at Lincoln Financial Field. It's going to be a nationally televised game, but Georgia Tech, despite the slow start, the Owls need to play well in this game. And if you continue to beat yourselves with things like special teams blunders, things like turnovers, they're not going to beat any team, regardless of how they've started.
So, Dan, a lot to improve on for the Owls coming off of Buffalo. Oh, we actually do have Rod Carey now at the podium, so we're going to go ahead live to Edberg Olson Hall and listen in to what he has to say.
Of last Saturday's game, in a coach's world, it feels like a lifetime ago because we're well into Georgia Tech. We've had 2 full-on practices for Georgia Tech. But just to recap that, as you go back and you look at the film since last I talked to some of you guys, I don't want to oversimplify it because there were execution problems there and what have you. We need to coach better. And then simply put, we need to not turn the ball over 4 times. I think that's I don't know how many games you're going to win with 4 turnovers and then a punt snap that's bad. So you can count that and say 5 turnovers to 1. I don't know how many games you win like that. So we've gone to work getting that corrected and really putting emphasis on those things this week, and in context of Georgia Tech with that. So let's open it up for questions.
Do you almost look at this as a way to kind of reestablish your identity after such a tough loss?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I've thought about that, Mark. I don't. I know that it got all of our attentions, and I'm not talking about just players, coaches too. And when you believe you're ready to go, and then you go out and we execute and coach and turn the ball over like we did, if you don't look at everything, I think you're doing something wrong. And so, certainly gone ahead and done that.
The uniqueness of this game with Coach Collins coming back, I mean, obviously, you probably won't ever face a staff that has the intimate knowledge of your players' strengths and weaknesses, and obviously your players kind of know what they like to do as coaches. How does that kind of impact this game?
Well, that's the best way I've heard that question asked, by the way. The impact of it is this, is that, okay, we have all of their film from last year, so all the schemes, offense, defense that were executed last year. And so we not only looked at that for this game, but we looked at that in the offseason for the team that we were going to be coaching. And there are certainly some things that we saw in there scheme-wise that we learned and, can put to use in this game plan, okay? They have the same thing if they went back and looked at Northern, so they have that. But the thing they have that you brought up is they have, player strength and weaknesses that they know from coaching them and recruiting them and seeing them play right now. And I think all of that on both sides is added preparation, right? It's just more knowledge than you have against someone else that you don't have these same ties to. But once the game starts, that preparation needs to take hold. And if you over-analyze and give them too much information, then it's like being prepared for a lot, you're prepared for nothing. Prepared for a little, you're prepared for a lot. So that's kind of how we've approached it, is making sure we're prepared for the things that, are really important to that game on Saturday.
I'm still trying to figure out the message you were trying to send by not having the players talk to the press the other day, since
well, it was really
protected.
Yeah, no, it was really simple, and it's just over. It's really simple for me, and it's all oversimplified again. Is that they were hurting, and they were upset, and my job as a coach is to protect them. So I chose at that moment to go ahead and say, hey, let's hold off until Tuesday and have them talk. Give them some space away from that performance. It's hard going out and playing a game and losing like that. That was the simple reason on the thing. You guys may not agree with it. You may not like it. And I have sympathy. A lot of you guys traveled up there and then didn't get to meet with the players. And I know that's hard on you guys too. So believe me, it's not going to be something I do every time, but it is my job to go ahead and protect them in that situation, and so I chose to do that.
The message is Temple tough. Is that Temple tough, not talking after a loss?
Well, I think that's your opinion. I don't think that talking or not talking has anything to do with tough, in my opinion.
Coach, against Clemson and Citadel, Georgia Tech had a lot of trouble defending the run. How do you think the Owls will exploit Georgia Tech's run defense?
Well, Citadel now, they're triple option, so everybody has trouble defending the run versus them. Okay, certainly they have that. So, listen, Georgia Tech has unbelievable, long, athletic guys that are running around and can cover a lot of space, and certainly are active on defense. And on offense, they're probably going through a little bit of transition right now from wishbone team to a traditional college offense, whatever traditional college offense is these days. And they're running the ball and trying to get better at throwing it, and they certainly have done that in the last few games. So I see a team that presents a lot of problems for us, and we certainly have to continue to prepare this week to solve those problems.
Is Malinowski or Gaines going to be here long snapper?
Gaines.
I was just looking at the depth chart, so Gaines is going to be doing it?
Yeah, we didn't get that switched on that. It's my fault. Yep.
How do you think, I mean, I know it's pretty simple, but just what's the importance of him just coming in and at least for a few snaps, just stabilizing it there?
You know, as you put it on film, what he did in the game after that was not just stabilizing, it was good. And I kind of told Ron, I said, Ron, now where was that in practice? Now that he did it in the game, now I expect it in practice. And he's come out and done a nice job in practice too, so been really happy with him.
He remains the long snapper on field goals and PATs.
Yeah, I'm talking about punt. Yeah, I'm talking about punt, yeah.
Coach, Gene Blue was held out of the catch in the first half against Buffalo, and he ended up with 8 catches for 87 yards. What do you think changed for him between the two halves?
Well, I didn't like the fact that we didn't throw it to him in the first half. That was the first change. And the second change is you're behind, so you're going to throw it a little more, so there are going to be plenty more opportunities. He's a guy that we love getting the ball to, and that was situationally probably presented itself like that in the first half to not have a catch, but still not good enough. We needed to get him the ball in the first half. Glad he came out and did what he did in the second half.
Receiving yards. So what have you seen from him in the first 2 games this season?
Well, just that. I mean, he's explosive. He catches the ball well. He runs good routes. And anytime you put the ball in his hands, he can go. And so we've seen a lot of that.
Scout team been interesting this week, just simulating what they do at quarterback and preparing for that.
Yeah, it has been. And kind of like them, we're playing a lot of guys at scout team quarterback because of what they do. You want to keep them fresh and keep them running.
Coach, getting back to the receivers, what you think of Brandon? We had 2 touchdowns on Saturday.
Brandon competed so hard. That was, he is one of the toughest guys I have been around. He just competes, and he was dog-tired and playing on special teams too, and kept going out there and competing and played well. He didn't just compete, but he played well. But he's a guy that you love to get the ball to because he's going to go fight for it. I know he had the 1 drop on the 3rd down, but he goes and fights, and I love that.
I mean, Russo throws the ball on the corner in the end zone, he just goes up and gets it.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and it looked like on that 1 touchdown that he overthrew him, and Brandon just wouldn't allow that. And then on the 2-point conversion, that was actually out of bounds. I mean, Brandon just went up, and he's like, I'm going to make this catch, and he did. Unfortunately, he just came down out of bounds. He had bodies underneath him.
What did you think of the Sean Bradley targeting when you got back to look at it, and then what kind of impact did that have on the game?
Yeah, when I looked at it, I can see why they called it targeting. We have to go ahead and adapt to the way the game is today. From a pure football standpoint, I don't like it. It's a bang-bang play. But from a safety standpoint, I do like the call, is that we're trying to change that. And that's outside of character for Sean. I think he knew it right away. He put himself in harm's way and the quarterback in harm's way by that. And so he knows that's not something. And the effect it had on the game, I think anytime you lose your vocal leader and maybe emotional leader on that side of the ball, although we have good leadership over there, that hurts you. It does. It just flat out hurts you. Now, IGM came in and played really well. IGM's a good player too, but emotionally there was probably a deficit there.
How key of a stretch is this? I mean, coming off a loss, Georgia Tech and all that entails, and then you have a short week. How important is this stretch going to be over the whole season?
Yeah, well, I don't know about after this game. I don't ever look at that. I just look at this, and this is, here, let me give you a coaching cliche, okay? This is the most important why, because it's the next one. And that's really how we have to approach it. Whether we were sitting here 3-0 or 2-1 like we are, I think that if you don't put all your attention into this one, but you're not going to have much of a chance.
Yeah, Brian, they've had some issues on their offensive line. Is there stuff that you can maybe? I know last week, Saturday, you really, like you said, you couldn't get them into obvious passing downs because you get behind. This week, is there something you can exploit up front against Georgia Tech, provided the game doesn't get out of control?
Well, I hope, but I mean, it's really not an X and O things. It's really a one-on-one thing. It's really a, can we get ourselves in a situation where they can only double so many guys up front, right? So the guys that have one-on-ones, can we get them into a situation where they can win more than they lose and get those TFLs and get them into passing situations where now we're pretty good. When we can make an offense one-dimensional, I think we have a good shot.
Back-to-back weeks, you guys have struggled on third down. Is there anything you guys have been doing specifically in practice to address that?
Yeah, we changed our prep for it, to be quite honest with you. Obviously, when it's broke like that 2 weeks in a row, we're going to change how we prepare for it. And that starts with our film study and how we're looking at that and why we're looking at that and when we're looking at that. And then it's going to change on the practice field, too. We're going to do a couple of things different scripting-wise, kind of the nitty-gritty of it, to try to really emphasize that and get us back to executing at a high level on third down.
Well, there's a discussion after the completions, and how did you, it's almost rudimentary because you kind of expect passes to be caught. How do you address that in practice?
Catch more. Catch more. It's really probably the simplest way to do it. If you're dropping, you got to get on the jugs more, you got to catch more, you just got to keep going. It's a muscle memory habit, and so you have to try to create that habit inside of your muscles. So that's what we've done.
Coach, Georgia Tech's secondary is ranked in the top 10 in the country for pass yards allowed. What have you seen on film from them so far?
Well, like I said, big, long, athletic, can cover a lot of ground in space, and that's why they're having success back there. Not only that group, but as a defense, defending the pass, because they can go ahead and maybe what looks like some space, they can close that space very quickly. And you see that over and over and over again on film. And so that's a big reason they're having success.
Anthony was talking about how they go a lot of man-to-man. Maryland also did that, and you made them pay. Do you have a preference?
Their man-to-man is probably a little bit different. They probably get to it a little different on how inside of their scheme it works. Do I personally have a preference? I wish that they'd play 20 yards off and let us just throw a home run catch every time, but I don't think anybody's going to do that. So, no, I don't have a preference on that.
Coach, linebacker Charlie Thomas has been a disruptive presence early this season.
That was Rod Carey live at Edberg Olson Hall.
Yeah, lots to go over. So now we begin with Inside the Nest reporter Dom Gillespie. Now, Dom, there was a lot there. I want to start with how he's preparing for Georgia Tech. He actually turned it into a bit of a positive. For us media members, it's a big deal. Jeff Collins coming back to the link. He obviously was not at Temple at the same time. He took over for Jeff Collins, but he really turned it into a positive, mentioned how there's a lot of old film on Jeff Collins-led offenses. How much do you expect that to play into it? Two teams that are very, very familiar with each other.
I don't expect Carey here to use a lot of the film that he found from Collins because Collins will probably see it coming. But like you said, he did turn it into a positive. He has the old film. He knows how to utilize players like Isaiah Wright, like your Jagger Gardners. I can really see him switching it up a lot this week against Georgia Tech. This is a big game for the Owls. Got to come back and make a statement after that bad loss at Buffalo.
Yeah, Dom and Rod Carey today talking about with the media the way that they need to win the game is to not turn the ball over 4 or 5 times in a game. Go ahead and attest to that and how the Temple defense needs to. How the Temple offense needs to improve on this going into their Georgia Tech matchup.
Russo last season, he was a little bit thrown into it. I'm sure all of us here was expecting Newtile to be the guy all last year, come out and lose the first 2 games, and then Russo comes in against a pretty good Maryland team last year, and then to start the rest of the season, him having that type of TD to interception ratio is not good, but we'll take that. And going into this season now, the Owls need his decision making to be better. He needs to get better looks at coverage, and he needs to get the ball to his receivers in space and stop turning the ball over. That's just the biggest thing.
Now, today at practice was the first time the players spoke since their first loss of the season up at Buffalo. Someone actually directly asked him, said, is that Temple tough of you, not letting your players talk? And he kind of, spun it nicely and said that I was just protecting my players. This was the decision. I'm not going to do this all the time. A, what did you think of it? And B, are you buying this defense for it?
I am buying it. I like what Carey said. And the Temple tough question, the person that asked that, Carey got a little snappy with it. Yeah. We've been seeing that the past couple of weeks. Carey snapped right back at him. I don't think it has anything to do with toughness. I like the way he phrased it, though. Yeah. I'm the coach. It's my job to protect these guys. It was a really, really bad loss to Buffalo. I'm happy he said that. He's got to protect his players, keep them clear-minded, and then go into Georgia Tech with a fresh slate.
Thank you so much, Dom, for joining us. Well, Rod Carey, he had plenty to talk about, and so did the players. Remember, the players weren't made available after the game in Buffalo, so today was the first time we have heard from them since this tough loss. And as you can imagine, they are moving on from Buffalo and really only talking Georgia Tech and Coach Collins.
We say it's a 24-hour rule, win or loss. You have 24 hours to celebrate it or to make the corrections that you need to make and move on to the next week. So it's been 24 hours. We turn the page, and I think that we have a good opportunity to come back home in front of our fans and get a big win against a Power 5 school.
We're focused on us. We're not really worried about the opponent. We have faceless opponents every week, so it's not really who we're playing. It's what we're going to do to win.
We really just worried about us. We're not really worried about the outside noise or our performer coaches, whoever came through here. We're just worried about us and what we got to take care of. We know we had a bad loss last week, and we're trying to bounce back this week. And we're worried about what we have to do, not what everybody else is worried about what we did or things like that. We just know we got to come out get better.
I'm extremely excited. This is one of the games I have marked on my calendar for a long, long time. And it should be a fun game. Coach Collins is going to be out there, all the old coaching staff and this new coaching staff. It should be a good time, a good game. Yeah, of course. I'm definitely going to say and talk some trash a little bit, but it's all love, most definitely.
And definitely adds a little fuel to the fire for some of the guys.
I think that it'll be cool to be on the same field as those guys again, but we have our coaching staff here and we love them and we won't want to play for anybody else, so we're happy with what we have.
Like, wow, well, he didn't play when he was here, and now when they get the chance to go out there and showcase their talents against him, that makes other players happy. So it's just going to be a fun game. It's going to be real fun to go out there and see our old coach. But, it's all love, no hate at all, no bad feelings. But we just got to come out there and worry about us and get the job done.
And the result of their first loss of the season should come a renewed focus, especially at home in Temple's last non-conference game against their former coach. You have guys like Sean Bradley, Chappelle Russell. They're excited. They've had this game marked on their calendar. When we come back, we will take a closer look at Georgia Tech, and the man in charge, Jeff Collins, has a big road trip to Philly coming up.
Inside the Nest will be back in 90 seconds.
Every single part of this program has to improve. From the top down, we are still in the infancy stages of the development of this program. Every day matters around this program. So as we are developing into the program we're going to be, we take advantage of every single day that's afforded to us. We don't worry about what happened yesterday. We don't worry about what happened an hour ago. When I left the team, I already told them what our schedule for tomorrow was.
Through a revolving door since 2015, taking the leap from defensive coordinator down at Florida, coming up to taking the head coaching spot at Temple. During his time on North Broad, he really brought the money down movement to Temple and the juiced up mentality to the sidelines. But his time in the cherry and white was pretty short-lived.
Yeah, it was. Only here 2 years. Kind of used Temple as a stepping stone, which is something we have seen with recent Owls head coach. Seems like a systematic issue. You can't fault them. You heard the players, at least publicly, no hard feelings for their former head coach. Give you a look here. Started as a defensive coordinator at Florida from 2015 to 2016. Made his way up to the head coaching role at Temple for just 2 seasons. Left last year prior to the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl, and now he has returned home at Georgia Tech, which, again, you can't blame him. Took an ACC coaching job near his hometown. He's coaching in Atlanta, but he's not off to a hot start, so we'll see how the season continues and also how the Owls' emotions stay in check here.
Speaking of his not-so-hot start, starting off the season well has proven to be an Achilles heel for Collins. He's started 1-2 in back-to-back seasons, and both times came a loss to an FCS team. Last year, the Owls fell to Nova, and this year, the Yellow Jackets were defeated by the Citadel.
In 2017, he started 2-1. That's after he barely lost Villanova he barely beat Villanova in 2017. Again, that was 16-13. He lost to a powerhouse in Notre Dame to start his coaching career in the Owls. That game was in South Bend. And this year didn't get any easier. Lost the defending national champions in Clemson to start his coaching career at Georgia Tech. He's had quarterback carousels. In 2017, he started with Logan Marchi under center. Then he went to Frank Newtile. 2018, he transfers to Anthony Russo, who's now the quarterback for the Owls. He never could find that consistency. Still had an overall successful tenure with the Owls. Again, went 15-10 and led the Owls to 2 bowl games.
Lots of changes for Collins and lots of changes for Temple. We now welcome back inside the Nest reporter Dom Gillespie to take a closer look at how the Owls offense has transformed.
Hey, Dom.
Thanks, guys. With the Owls matching up against the Yellow Jackets this Saturday, it marks a return to Philadelphia for Coach Collins. He's been gone for less than a year, so Collins will see many familiar faces, but he will see a much different scheme, especially on the offensive side. The most noticeable thing is how much faster the Owls offense is. The past 2 years, they were a no-huddle offense, but this is different. Kenny Yeboah breaks loose here, and the offensive line is hot on his tail to get to the ball. Next up, we got a pass to Brandon Mack. He'll break free here for 30 yards. As soon as he goes down, he wants to get up and celebrate. No time for that. Carey is on the sideline yelling for the next play. Jagger Gardner here. He will turn on the Jets against Maryland, breaks loose for 15 yards. He goes down hard, but he gets up. He's ready for the next play as well as the rest of the offense. Let's take a look at Russo here. Redshirt junior only had 14 touchdown passes through all of his games last season. He already has 10. That is right, 10 through 3 games alone this season. He finds Isaiah Wright on this beauty of a touchdown pass. The Owls love this next play. Russo does a great job here getting the defense moving the wrong direction, finds the redshirt freshman Aaron Jarman, gets into the end zone, good for 6 against Bucknell. This next play is not one of Russo's flashiest passes, but it's exactly what you love to see out of a quarterback. Places the ball perfectly for Jaden Blue, not even giving the defense a chance to make a play on it. Similar to the last play, Russo is going through his reads here, finds his man Isaiah Wright wide open in the middle of the field, gets Mr. Highlight Reel the ball in space, and lets him do the rest of the work. Even though the offense and Russo both looked good through the first 2 games, that game against Buffalo on Saturday was not something to remember, and it might give other teams a better blueprint for ways to pick apart the Owls. Got to see how they bounce back against GT. Reporting from Plasma, I'm Dom Gillespie, Brooklyn and Dan. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Dom. And switching gears, Georgia Tech is rebuilding, no question.
But they have playmakers that Temple need to keep an eye out for. I'll start with Charlie Thomas, sophomore linebacker, which means he's coached by former Owls linebackers coach Andrew Thacker, who moved on to Georgia Tech alongside Collins. Thomas's on-field awareness is strong, and his ability to find the ball carrier is in the numbers, with 2 sacks and 2 forced fumbles in 3 games this season. He also has 21 tackles this year, 1 shy of the Georgia Tech team lead. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. This is a guy who wasn't even receiving full playing time a season ago. He's earned his stripes, and he's the players the Owls are going to need to have marked on Saturday if they want to be successful.
Now go ahead and turn to the Yellow Jackets offense and pay attention to this guy. Redshirt sophomore running back Jordan Mason. With 44 attempts in 3 games, he's already racked up 249 yards. He's averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Mason has 4 touchdowns on the season. And yeah, I just mentioned he is only a sophomore, but the 6'1", 219-pound running back is a threat that the Owls cannot overlook this week. He's able to break tackles and make big plays.
Georgia Tech is off to a slow start this season, but the Owls can't afford to take them lightly.
Hey, look what happened in upstate New York. Here are our keys to the game for Temple this week.
I'll start with Anthony Russo. We've made a lot of it. His decision-making, it just flat out has to be better. Has already thrown 5 interceptions this season, had 14 a season ago. He throws a nice ball, but he can't continue to turn the ball over. That will be an Achilles heel, and the Owls will not continue to have success if he does that.
Rod Carey didn't really address too much of Russo's decision-making in today's press conference, but definitely something to keep an eye on moving on to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, my second key, it's got to be a big day for Ray Davis. You heard Rod Carey allude to it just a little bit. It's Georgia Tech's strong suit is in the secondary. It's going to be a tough challenge for Anthony Russo, but the Owls need to have a strong day on the run, and that plays right into the hands of Ray Davis. That's where Georgia Tech can be beat a little bit. The Georgia Tech, again, secondary is strong, run defense not so great. Ray Davis needs to have a big game in this one for the Owls to win.
A lot of pressure on that freshman's shoulders, but I don't doubt that he will excel this week. Now, my key to the game, Temple needs to win the field position battle. And obviously, this isn't something that's been easy on their special teams woes. They need to go ahead and figure out their long snapping situation, punting, kicking, all of it needs help.
Yeah, field position battle, absolutely huge. You saw it hurt them twice just in the second quarter alone against Buffalo. If you're going to have some of those miscues, sometimes you set up short and easy drives for your opponent. Winning the field position battle, big. Also going to have a new long snapper. If you're punting, you don't want to be punting out of your own end zone, regardless of who you have back there. Special teams and the field position battle will be big in this one.
And my last key to the game, Temple needs to get up early. And what I mean by that, Georgia Tech, their offense is only ranked 128th in the country. It's going to be important for the Owls to go ahead, get up early, maintain that lead, maintain control going through the entire day.
Yeah, I don't expect this to be much of an issue at all. You know those players are going to be fired up, especially in the early going, to get a stranglehold on Georgia Tech and their former head coach. And after the break, we're going no huddle, where we discuss Anthony Russo, memorable moments from the Jeff Collins era.
And we'll give you our predictions for Saturday's game. Don't go anywhere. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside the Nest, and welcome back to everyone's favorite segment. That's right, we're going no huddle.
5 minutes, 5 topics. Here we go. First question for you, Brooklyn. Who's been the bigger sophomore surprise? Receiver Jaden Blue or cornerback Christian Braswell?
Dan, great question. I'm going to go with Jaden Blue. He has done an outstanding job making up for missed time last season. If you can remember back 7 games last season, he stepped away from the team for personal reasons. He really made an impression coming back in the spring. He's formed a great relationship with Rod Carey, and he hasn't stopped working since. He's definitely going ahead and earning his spot as a starter. And with guys like Ventel Bryant and Sean Ryan and their departure, he has big shoes to fill.
I'm going to go with Christian Braswell. Look, he was a little bit more under the radar, also had big shoes to fill. The guy Jeff Collins used to talk about for 5 minutes alone in his press conferences, Rock Ya-Sin. Christian Braswell is now filling in for him. Departure of Rock Ya-Sin to the NFL draft, never easy, but Braswell has 5 tackles this far, had his first interception this past week. You see it there against Buffalo. He's good in coverage. He's been thrown into the fire, and he has responded. Not someone that we necessarily expected a big season from this year. The question was, who has been the biggest sophomore surprise? Got to be Christian Braswell.
All right, Dan, and let's take a look under center. Are you sold as Anthony Russo as the team's starting quarterback?
No, I'm not. And frankly, I haven't been since he took over last season. Look, he came in with a high top 25 quarterback ranking from College Football Focus, but I think it's maybe ignoring his decision-making just a little bit. You saw it against Buffalo. It's a defense he was torched by. 3 interceptions, another sack fumble. And this is a quarterback who has had, decision-making problems going back to last season when he threw 14 interceptions. He's had a bit of a stronger start to this year, 10 touchdowns, 5 picks, but I'm not sold yet. I don't know about you.
Me neither, Dan. I think the stats speak for themselves here. Coming into this season, off of that calf injury, things were already questionable. I'm sure Todd Centeio, he was ready to go, so I say let him have a little bit of action if things keep looking rocky as they do under center.
I don't know if he's lost his job yet, but I'm not sold. I'll just leave it at that. Brooklyn, there was a controversial decision at the end of this game, not even during the game. Rod Carey not allowing players to speak with the media up in Buffalo after the loss. Do you agree with the decision?
Well, Dan, he did address this today in his media press conference, saying that it was just plain simple. It was an easy choice for him as a coach. You have to respect that. But I say that the luxuries that come along with being a D1 coach, you need to embrace the rough times too. Okay, it's not just special treatment for the kids What is he even protecting them from? I don't know. But no, I don't agree with this move by Rod Carey to make his players unavailable to media after the game.
Brooklyn, I agree with you. Look, this is a decision I understand. You're trying to protect your players. They're not professionals. They just suffered their first loss. And emotions are going to be running high. You don't want them to say something stupid, but it's something they're going to have to get used to. If you can speak to the media after a win, you got to be able to do it after a loss, especially for players on this team who are going to be playing with the big boys in the NFL on Sundays next year. You're not going to have that option anymore. So this is something that I don't expect to see again. I don't personally agree with the decision, but like you said, his job is to protect his players and be a coach first. He can't be worried about outside noise, especially when it's your first loss of the season.
100% agree, Dan. Moving on, though, to our next question. What is your most memorable moment of the Jeff Collins era?
Well, Brooklyn, it's got to be the bowl game. He goes down, wins 28-3 at Tropicana Field. They run all over FIU. They get led to a bowl game. It's the only bowl game they've had since either of us have been here at Temple University. That was a great win for the program and really speaks to how far this Temple football program has come over time. A bowl game win is something Temple fans years and years ago would have laughed at the idea that they'd even qualify for one. For them to go down, huge for the school, huge for the program.
Yeah, bowl game, certainly very exciting time for Jeff Collins. But of course, how can you forget about that last season? Previously ranked number 20 Cincinnati Bearcats, the Owls take them down in a commanding overtime win. Remember Sean Bradley sealing the deal with his interception late in the game. The offense was on fire, defense, special teams, way back when all three phases of the game were rolling. The energy and the link that day was the most electric I have seen since my time at Temple. So I'm going to say that was just such a highlight for Jeff Collins and his career at the helm of the Owls. Well, moving on to our last question, of course, everyone wants to know our predictions. What is your prediction for Saturday?
Well, I'm not sure if they want to know our predictions. We haven't been too great at them.
This is true. This is
very true. But they are playing Georgia Tech. I'm going to predict a win. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to pull the cliche out of the box here. This is a throw the records out kind of game. Both teams know each other very well. Coach Jeff Collins, Andrew Thacker, and other members of the staff used to coach at Temple. A lot of the Temple players recruited by Jeff Collins. This is a game that's going to be very high in emotions, very high intensity. I expect it to be close. I think the Owls pull out a close one, maybe just a field goal or game decided by a touchdown. It's at home, but Georgia Tech, as we mentioned, has not started out well. They lost to the Citadel. Their only win was barely beating USF, so I don't think they're as strong as they have been in prior years. This should be a game the Owls win.
Well, we're going to align our views again. I also think that they are going to pull out a win this weekend. So I think you make a great point here that it's going to be a single possession game. It's not going to be pretty. Emotions are running high, but it will be a great matchup at the Link on Saturday. Well, it's time to settle down and take a look at the rest of the AAC after our final break.
Inside the Nest, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Since he was on the bye, but if you look at junior running back Michael Warren, the second stats, you'd think the Bearcats have played 4 games already. Warren has 4 touchdowns through 3 games, which is tied for second in the AAC. The dual threat has a receiving touchdown to his name to round out the 8 catches for 72 yards he has out of the backfield. And SMU senior safety Patrick Nelson is making his presence known in the secondary for the 4-0 Mustangs. Nelson ranks second in the AAC in tackles with 27. He leads in the AAC in sacks as well with 6 and also has an interception and fumble recovery. Houston senior quarterback De'Aaron King made news on Monday when he announced that he will redshirt the rest of the 2019 season. He does plan on coming back to the Cougars though in 2020. King is a human highlight reel. He ranks 3rd in the AAC in scoring, and through 4 games, the quarterback had 12 total touchdowns, 6 passing, and 6 rushing. And even though we won't be seeing him for the remainder of 2019, King made history in the Cougars' Thursday night loss at Tulane.
Yeah, Thursday night in New Orleans saw a crazy finish between the Houston Cougars and Tulane Green Wave in a game that appeared over at the half but ended in dramatic fashion. Pick it up in the second quarter. De'Aaron King playing what apparently is his final game of the season. He finds Keith Corbin over the middle. 21-7 Houston. De'Aaron King, he's going to do it himself. 35-yard touchdown run. 28-7. Houston leads over Tulane. But the Green Wave aren't going anywhere. Now 28-14 here. Justin McMillan, he hits Darnell Mooney on the bomb. He cuts the Houston lead to just 7 points. We'll go early fourth quarter. McMillan keeps it. We have a tie ball game in the Big Easy.
Not a sponsor yet, maybe soon. McMillan.
Tulane actually takes a field goal lead. Houston has to come all the way back and tie it with a chip shot, 31-31. 12 seconds to go. McMillan hits Jake McCleskey. But first we have a trick play. Looked like they were going to need it to take it to overtime. McMillan now going to hit Jake McCleskey, and that is your ball game. 38-31. Tulane wins it. Houston now still only has one win on the season, not the start they were expecting.
De'Aaron King may have been on the losing end on Thursday night, but he certainly left his mark in the NCAA record book with his 15th consecutive game with a passing and rushing touchdown. That mark was previously held by former Florida Gator, Denver Bronco, New York Jet, New England Patriot, Philadelphia Eagle, Scottsdale Scorpion, St. Lucia Met, Columbia Firefly, Binghamton Rumble Pony, and Syracuse Met. Tim Tebow, during his time in Gainesville, Florida, Tebow found his way in the record books in more ways than one, finishing his career at Florida as the SEC's all-time leader in passing efficiency, completion percentage, touchdown to interception ratio, rushing yards by a quarterback, rushing touchdowns, and total touchdowns responsible for. Safe to say Houston's De'Aaron King joins some elite company.
Hard to believe we've already completed a month of the season. We've got you covered with a conference standings update. Taking a look at the AAC standings, as we now have one more conference game to add to a full slate of non-conference contests. Navy, SMU, and Memphis are the only teams from the American who remain unbeaten.
Yeah, UCF, if you were watching, they were handed its first regular season loss since 2016. Thanks to Pitt this past weekend, the Panthers actually ran the Philly Special. They're calling it the Pitt Special, though, on fourth down with less than a minute to go in the game to end the Knights' 27-game regular season win streak, which was the longest in the FBS. In the West, which is already crowded with frontrunners, SMU pulled off an upset over Texas Christian University, a game in which the Mustangs were 9.5 underdogs.
We're starting to wrap up our coverage, but make sure to tune in to OwlSports Update on Thursday and Inside the Nest next Tuesday. That'll do it for this edition of Inside the Nest. For Brooklyn Vaughn, I'm Dan Wilson.
Have a great week, everybody.